Here's a shocking statistic that will change how you think about your home. Research reveals that the typical American over 60 owns more than 300,000 individual items. That's not just possessions. That represents 6 decades of cherished memories, meaningful experiences, and life-defining moments carefully preserved in your living space. But here's the devastating truth. Nobody wants to discuss nearly every piece of decluttering advice you've encountered was created by people in their 30s who have never faced the overwhelming task of sorting through for decades of meaningful belongings. These so-called experts are giving you strategies that completely ignore the emotional complexity and physical realities of decluttering later in life. Today, I'm revealing the 8 most destructive decluttering myths that have been sabotaging your efforts since you turned 60. More importantly, I'll share the revolutionary approach discovered by Patricia and James, a couple who completely transformed their retirement by rejecting these harmful myths. Their breakthrough method is so effective that their own adult children now seek their organizing wisdom. Before we dive in, if you're tired of decluttering advice that makes you feel guilty or overwhelmed, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated exclusively to solutions that work for our generation's unique challenges. And if this resonates with you, give it a like. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Stay with me because myth number 5 will completely revolutionize. Meet Patricia and James. A different approach. Patricia and James, both 68, represent countless individuals in our generation who've built remarkable lives. Patricia devoted her career to nursing, while James shaped young minds as a high school principal. After 4 decades of dedicated service, they found themselves in a stunning 4-bedroom home that had become a repository of their rich experiences. Their home contained family treasures passed down through generations, precious artwork created by their children, professional accolades recognizing their contributions, souvenirs from adventures around the world, and thousands of photographs documenting their journey together. This wasn't a hoarding situation, it was the natural accumulation of a life fully lived. Our home wasn't simply cluttered, Patricia reflects. It was completely overwhelmed with the weight of our memories and experiences. The turning point came when their beloved grandson developed severe asthma and could no longer visit because dust and allergens had accumulated in their treasure-filled rooms. Initially, Patricia and James attempted to follow the popular decluttering methodologies they found online and in best-selling books. However, these approaches left them feeling guilty about valuing their possessions, overwhelmed by impossible timelines, and increasingly stressed rather than liberated. Most advice made us feel fundamentally flawed for cherishing our belongings, James explains. We weren't compulsive hoarders struggling with mental health issues. We were simply 2 people who had lived extraordinarily full lives and wanted to honor that journey. That's when they discovered a completely different philosophy, one specifically designed for individuals who've accumulated decades of meaningful possessions. Within 6 months, they had transformed their living space without sacrificing the items that truly mattered to their identity and family legacy. Their home evolved from a source of chaos and stress into a sanctuary of peace and welcome. Today, I'm sharing the 8 destructive myths that had been sabotaging Patricia and James, along with the truthful alternatives that finally delivered the results they needed. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by traditional decluttering advice? Has someone made you feel guilty about keeping items that hold deep meaning for you? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with the same challenges. Myth number 1. If you haven't used it in a year, discard it. This represents perhaps the most pervasive and damaging decluttering mythology for those of us over 60. Patricia vividly remembers how this advice nearly led her to discard her mother's meticulously hand-stitched quilted, irreplaceable family heirloom that hadn't been used in years, but carried generations of family history within its threads. The reality, the one-year rule, was specifically designed for consumable products and trendy items, not for meaningful possessions that connect us to our personal history and family legacy. After decades of living and accumulating experiences, we've collected items that serve purposes far beyond immediate utility. These objects function as touchstones to our personal narrative and identity, a superior approach. Instead of asking, "When did I last use this item?" start asking, "What role does this serve in my life story?" This fundamental shift in perspective acknowledges that different possessions serve different purposes in our lives. Some items are purely utilitarian, meant to be used regularly for practical purposes. Others serve as memory anchors, connecting us to beloved people, significant achievements, or transformative moments. Still others represent legacy treasures, meant to be carefully preserved and eventually passed to specific individuals who will cherish them. The 3 essential categories. Patricia and James developed a simple but powerful categorization system. Utility items, possessions used regularly for practical, everyday purposes. Memory anchors, items that connect to important people, achievements, or life moments. Legacy treasures, possessions intended to be passed to specific individuals. Once we recognized that different items serve fundamentally different purposes in our lives, the pressure to discard based solely on frequency of use completely disappeared. Patricia explains, "My mother's quilt transformed from a source of guilt into a properly stored legacy treasure for our granddaughter." The scientific foundation. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology demonstrates that meaningful possessions serve as crucial identity anchors for seniors, providing essential continuity of self during major life transitions like retirement. These objects aren't clutter, they're integral components of your identity narrative. Practical implementation. Create a memory anchor box for each decade of your adult life. Limit each container to a reasonable size, but allow yourself to keep items that transport you back to those significant periods without any justification required. For legacy treasures, add detailed notes explaining their significance and identifying their intended recipients. I'm curious, have you ever regretted discarding something meaningful because someone told you to follow the one-year rule? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might prevent someone else from making the same mistake. Myth number 2. Decluttering should be completed quickly and aggressively. Patricia remembers watching popular decluttering television shows where entire homes underwent complete transformations in a single weekend. When she and James attempted to replicate this aggressive approach, they ended up physically exhausted, emotionally overwhelmed, and suffering from decision fatigue so severe they couldn't continue their efforts. The reality, after accumulating possessions for over 6 decades. Expecting to sort through them in just a few days isn't merely unrealistic, it's physically and emotionally harmful. Rapid decluttering leads to regrettable decisions and complete burnout. We were attempting to sort through 45 years of marriage and individual history in one weekend, James recalls. By Sunday evening, we were making completely arbitrary decisions just to finish the process. We were both physically exhausted and emotionally drained. What actually works? The 5-5-5 method. Patricia and James developed their revolutionary 555 method. 5 minutes of decluttering, 5 items per session, and 5 sessions per week. This gentle, sustainable approach acknowledges both the physical limitations that often accompany aging and the emotional weight of sorting through a lifetime of accumulated possessions. It transforms decluttering from an overwhelming, impossible project into a manageable, consistent practice. The 555 method changed absolutely everything, Patricia explains. Suddenly, we weren't racing against some artificial deadline. We could thoughtfully consider each individual item. Most importantly, we weren't physically or emotionally exhausted. We actually began looking forward to our decluttering sessions because they felt achievable and productive. The scientific foundation, cognitive research, clearly shows that decision-making represents a limited mental resource that depletes with use. Older adults experience decision fatigue more rapidly when faced with emotionally charged choices. Micro-sessions preserve precious mental energy for high-quality decisions. Practical implementation. Create a dedicated decluttering station somewhere in your home, a comfortable chair with excellent lighting, a sorting box, and perhaps some tea or coffee. Transform this into a pleasant ritual rather than a dreaded chore. Use a timer to maintain your 5-minute limit and celebrate each completed session as a meaningful accomplishment. Have you ever felt completely exhausted from trying to declutter too quickly? Did the marathon weekend approach work for you, or did it leave you feeling worse than when you started? Share your thoughts in the comments. Myth number 3. Minimalism should be everyone's goal. James was particularly affected by this destructive myth. As a former high school principal, he had collected hundreds of treasured books, heartfelt letters from students, teaching awards, and memorabilia that told the complete story of his 40-year educational career. When he attempted to embrace minimalism, he felt like he was systematically erasing his life's most meaningful work. The reality, minimalism represents a personal aesthetic choice, not a moral virtue or universal standard. While it works beautifully for some individuals, many people over 60 find that curated abundance proves more appropriate and fulfilling for their lifestyle and identity. The goal should be creating a home environment that supports your current lifestyle while honoring and celebrating your unique journey through life. I attempted to become a minimalist because that's what every expert recommended, James explains. I discarded books I had treasured for decades, only to repurchase some of them later. I felt like I was trying to erase my personal history to fit someone else's idealized vision. What actually works? Purposeful curation. The superior approach involves keeping items that serve either a current practical function or maintain a meaningful connection to your identity, but displaying and organizing them with clear intention and purpose. For James, this meant creating a dedicated home library featuring his most treasured books, displaying carefully selected teaching awards, and organizing student letters in beautiful albums that could be enjoyed and shared rather than hidden away in storage. He released duplicate books and paperwork that no longer served any purpose, but he honored the items that authentically told his story. Now visitors enter our home and immediately understand who we are as people, Patricia observes. It's not sparse or empty, but everything has a designated place and clear purpose. Our home tells our story without overwhelming us or our guests. The scientific foundation, environmental psychology studies consistently demonstrate that our homes both reflect and reinforce our personal identities. For individuals with rich, long lives, a certain quantity of meaningful objects provides essential psychological comfort and reinforces self-continuity. Practical implementation. Instead of trying to minimize everything, focus on showcasing what truly matters. Create legacy displays, shadow boxes, photo walls, or dedicated shelves that highlight your most meaningful collections. Rotate seasonal or themed displays to enjoy more of your treasures without cluttering every available surface. Has the pressure to become minimalist ever made you feel like you're erasing your personal history? Or have you found a healthy balance between minimalism and honoring your past? Share your thoughts below. Myth number 4. You shouldn't keep things for sentimental reasons. This particular myth brought Patricia to tears during their decluttering journey. After losing her beloved sister to cancer, certain items, her sister's favorite scarf, handwritten family recipes, and even seemingly ordinary objects they had purchased together became precious connections to cherished memories. The reality, sentimental value represents genuine, legitimate value, especially as we age and experience loss. Research consistently shows that meaningful objects provide comfort, preserve crucial family narratives, and help us process grief in healthy ways. The key isn't eliminating sentimental items, it's curating them with clear intention. A popular decluttering expert told me that keeping my sister's belongings wouldn't bring her back. Patricia remembers. But that completely missed the fundamental point. These items weren't about denying the reality of death. They were about celebrating and honoring the beautiful relationship we had shared. What actually works? The heart connection inventory. This involves a deliberate, thoughtful process of identifying, documenting, and properly preserving genuinely meaningful sentimental items. Patricia carefully selected the most meaningful items that connected her to her sister's memory, photographed each piece, and wrote detailed descriptions of the specific memories attached to each object. Some items, like the handwritten family recipes, were professionally framed and displayed prominently in her kitchen. Others were carefully stored in a special memory box designed specifically for this purpose. The crucial element was being selective, while honoring these important connections rather than dismissing them as unworthy clutter. Now, when I see her recipe for lemon bars framed in my kitchen, I smile instead of crying. Patricia shares, "It's not clutter, it's a daily connection to someone I will always love." The scientific foundation, therapeutic research demonstrates that physical objects can serve as transitional objects that help us maintain healthy connections to those we've lost. For seniors who have experienced multiple losses throughout their lives, these items provide essential emotional continuity and comfort. Practical implementation. Create memory vessels, beautiful boxes or albums, designated for specific people or important periods in your life. Limit yourself to what fits comfortably in each vessel, but don't feel guilty about keeping what truly connects you to loved ones. Add detailed notes explaining the significance for future generations who will inherit these treasures. Have you been made to feel guilty for keeping sentimental items? How do you balance honoring precious memories while preventing overwhelming clutter? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Myth number 5. Your children want your heirlooms and collections. This revelation proved perhaps the most difficult for both Patricia and James to accept. They had been carefully preserving complete china sets, extensive stamp collections, antique furniture, pieces, and family heirlooms, with the assumption that their children would treasure these items as much as they did. The reality, generational preferences have shifted dramatically over the past few decades. Most millennials and Gen X adults prefer experiences over possessions and have completely different aesthetic preferences. Keeping items solely to pass down often creates future burdens rather than preserving meaningful legacy. When we finally had an honest conversation with our children about what they actually wanted, we were genuinely shocked, James admits. The antique dining set we'd been carefully preserving for our daughter. She confessed she had nowhere to put it and preferred modern furniture. But she desperately wanted the family recipes and photo albums we'd considered discarding. What actually works? The legacy conversation. This involves a direct, pressure-free discussion with family members about which items hold genuine meaning for them, followed by documenting the stories behind important pieces. Patricia and James invited their children over separately and asked them to walk through the house, noting items they genuinely connected with emotionally. They were surprised to discover their son deeply valued James's vintage record collection, but had no interest in the valuable coin collection his grandfather had left him. Their daughter treasured Patricia's handwritten recipe cards, but felt no attachment to her fine china. Once we understood what they truly valued, we could make much better decisions about everything else, Patricia explains. It was incredibly liberating to realize we didn't need to preserve things that no one actually wanted. The scientific foundation. Intergenerational studies reveal that while physical objects matter less to younger generations, the stories and history behind them remain deeply important. Documenting the narrative can preserve legacy even when the physical objects themselves aren't retained. Practical implementation. Create digital or written records of your most treasured items, histories, who made them, how they were acquired, their historical context, and why they matter to your family. This provenance journal preserves the legacy even if the physical items eventually find new homes. Were you surprised to discover which items your children or grandchildren actually wanted? Have you had this important conversation yet? Share your experience in the comments section. Myth number 6. You just need better storage solutions. James laughs now about their container phase, when they believed the answer to their clutter problems lay in purchasing more sophisticated storage systems. Our basement became filled with empty storage containers while the actual clutter remained upstairs, he recalls. We were literally storing our storage solutions. The reality, for those of us over 60 who have spent decades accumulating possessions, no amount of storage can solve the fundamental issue of owning too many items. Storage often conceals the problem rather than addressing it, and can actually enable continued accumulation. We spent hundreds of dollars on beautiful containers, specialized hangers, and elaborate shelf systems, Patricia remembers. But all we accomplished was organizing our clutter rather than actually addressing it. Plus, many of those systems required bending, reaching, or climbing that became physically challenging. What actually works? The one-in-tout system combined with prime real estate principles. Patricia and James established a clear rule: for anything new that entered their home, 2 similar items had to leave. Additionally, they identified the prime real estate in their home spaces that were easily accessible without bending or reaching, and reserved these areas exclusively for items used weekly. This approach forced us to make intentional decisions about what deserved our most accessible spaces, James explains. Suddenly, we were evaluating new purchases, not just on whether we liked them, but whether they were worth displacing existing items. The scientific foundation, accessibility studies, demonstrate that as we age, our functional living space naturally shrinks to areas that are comfortably reachable. Items stored in difficult-to-access locations often become effectively unusable, regardless of their actual value. Practical implementation. Map your home's accessibility zones, categorizing spaces by how easily you can reach them without physical strain. Reserve easy access areas for frequently used items and be extremely selective about what deserves this prime real estate. For collections or seasonal items, consider rotating displays rather than attempting to show everything simultaneously. Have you fallen into the trap of buying organizing products without actually reducing clutter? Did those solutions work for you, or did they just hide the problem? I'm curious about your experiences, so please share in the comments. Myth number 7. Everything should have a practical purpose. This myth particularly affected Patricia's approach to her extensive craft supplies. Having been an avid quilter and knitter throughout her adult life, she had accumulated fabrics, yarns, and specialized tools, many of which hadn't been used recently as arthritis had limited her creative abilities. The reality, as we age, our relationship with hobbies and creativity naturally evolves, but that doesn't diminish the value of creative possessions. Items that connect us to our sense of capability, possibility, and identity serve crucial psychological purposes beyond immediate practical use. I was told to donate all my quilting supplies since I hadn't completed a quilt in over 2 years, Patricia shares. But sitting with my fabrics, planning potential projects, and even just organizing my collections brought me genuine joy. Getting rid of them felt like admitting I would never create anything again. What actually works? The creative capacity shift. This involves acknowledging changes in abilities while finding new ways to engage with lifelong passions and their associated possessions. Instead of abandoning quilting entirely, Patricia created a more accessible creative space featuring her favorite fabrics and tools. She began making smaller projects that worked within her current physical capabilities and invited her granddaughter over for crafting sessions, where she could share her accumulated knowledge and skills. I kept what genuinely inspired me and what I could realistically use, but I released the expectation of creating the same way I used to, she explains. Now my supplies aren't a painful reminder of what I can't do, they're an invitation to explore what I still can accomplish. The scientific foundation. Occupational therapy research shows that maintaining connections to lifelong skills and interests supports cognitive health and emotional well-being in seniors, even when those activities must be significantly modified. Creative identity remains important throughout our entire lives. Practical implementation. For hobby supplies and creative tools, create a possibility space rather than focusing solely on current output. Keep materials that still inspire you, but be realistic about physical limitations. Consider how you might adapt hobbies or share them across generations when direct participation becomes challenging. Have you struggled with letting go of hobby supplies or tools as your capabilities have changed? How have you adapted your creative pursuits over time? Share your wisdom in the comments below. Myth number 8. Decluttering works the same at every age. This was the fundamental realization that transformed Patricia and James's entire approach. After multiple failed attempts following one-size-fits-all methods, they recognized that after decades of accumulation requires a completely different framework and philosophy. The reality, decluttering in your 60s, 70s, and beyond isn't simply about creating an Instagram-worthy home or following the latest organizing trend. It's about life review, legacy creation, and preparing both your physical space and your loved ones for future transitions. Every popular decluttering book or show seemed to be created by or for someone in their 30s or 40s. James observes, they completely miss the emotional and practical realities of sorting through a lifetime's accumulation and the physical challenges that often accompany aging. What actually works? The life season approach. This involves recognizing that decluttering in your senior years is about honoring your past while creating appropriate space for your current season of life. Patricia and James developed a comprehensive system that viewed decluttering not as elimination, but as thoughtful curation. They focused first on safety and accessibility, ensuring their home supported their changing physical needs. Then, they addressed the narrative quality of their possessions, how their home told their story, and what legacy they wanted to leave. We stopped trying to erase evidence of our long, full lives, Patricia says. Instead, we became curators of our own personal history, keeping what best represented each chapter and what served us in the present moment. The scientific foundation, developmental psychology, identifies life review as a crucial task in our later years. Thoughtful engagement with possessions can support this process, helping integrate life experiences while adapting to current circumstances. Practical implementation. Approach decluttering as creating a personal life museum. What exhibits from each period of your life best represent who you were and who you've become? What deserves prominence and what can be documented and released? Consider creating memory books that preserve the stories of items before letting the physical objects go. Has traditional decluttering advice felt disconnected from your actual needs and circumstances? What approaches have worked better for you? Share your insights in the comments section below. The transformation. 18 months later, 18 months after rejecting these 8 destructive decluttering myths, Patricia and James's home and lives have been completely transformed, but not in the way most decluttering shows would portray. Their home isn't minimalist. It's not a showplace featuring perfect organization systems. Instead, it has become a comfortable, accessible space that tells their story while supporting their current needs and lifestyle. We can find what we need when we need it, James says. Our grandchildren can visit without their allergies acting up. But most importantly, we're no longer stressed by our possessions or guilty about what we've chosen to keep. Patricia adds, the breathing room we've created isn't just physical, it's emotionally by being intentional about what remains. Each item brings joy rather than obligation. The unexpected benefit emerged in their family relationships. By having difficult but honest conversations about heirlooms and legacy items, they strengthen connections with their children. By documenting the stories behind meaningful objects, they preserved family history in a way that resonated across generations. Our daughter recently told us something that made all the effort worthwhile. Patricia shares with emotion in her voice. She said that for the first time, she wasn't anxious about eventually dealing with our home. She knew the stories that mattered, understood which items were important, and wouldn't be overwhelmed by decades of accumulation. This represents perhaps the greatest gift of thoughtful decluttering in our senior years. Peace of mind, not just for ourselves, but for those we love most. Your next steps if you've recognized yourself in Patricia and James's story. Remember that decluttering after 60 isn't about following someone else's arbitrary rules. It's about creating a home that honors your past while supporting your present. Which of these decluttering myths has impacted you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another community member needs to hear. If you found value in today's content, please hit the like button and share it with friends who might be struggling with their own decluttering journey. Every share helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Subscribe to Senior Reset for more content specifically designed for our generation's unique challenges and opportunities. We're building a community of people who understand that our needs are different, then that's perfectly okay. Your home should tell your story beautifully, support your current life, and bring you peace. You deserve nothing less.